Welcome. The HIPSTERS Diaries, audio podcast. To transform a heart is to save a life. Let me introduce you to your soul. Come reason with me.
Peace and blessings, everyone. Welcome back to HIPSTERS Diaries. You're here with Poetic Mi. If you're hearing my voice tonight, thank you for returning to this space. A space for reflection, a space for healing, a space for truth, a space for becoming. If this is your first time joining me, welcome. If you've been here since chapter 1, welcome back. We're currently on chapter 2 of an 8-part journey called the Becoming series. 8 Sundays, 8 conversations, 8 opportunities to understand ourselves a little more deeply. Last week, we explored identity and self-discovery. We talked about the masks that we wear, the expectations we inherit, the versions of ourselves we create to survive, the journey of finding ourselves beneath all of it. But tonight, we move into something equally important: love, attachment, and the emotional imprints left behind by our earliest relationships. Because before our first romantic relationship, before our first heartbreak, before our first deep attachment, someone was already teaching us what love looked like. And whether we realize it or not, those lessons often follow us into adulthood. So tonight, let's reason. I want to ask you something. Why do certain people feel familiar almost immediately? Why do we find ourselves repeating similar relationship patterns? Why do some connections leave such deep marks on our lives? For a long time, I thought those answers began with dating. I thought they began with adulthood. I thought they began with romantic relationships. But the older I became, the more I realized something. Most of our love story begins long before we ever fall in love. It begins in childhood. It begins at home. It begins with the people who first taught us what connection feels like. And whether those lessons were healthy, unhealthy, complete, or incomplete, they often become the blueprint we carry into adulthood. Sometimes we spend years believing we're simply unlucky in love. But what if we're actually repeating lessons we haven't fully understood yet? What if our relationships are trying to tell us something? What if every attachment carries a story? Psychologists often use the term called family of origin. Simply put, our family becomes our first classroom for relationships. It's where we learn how to communicate, how to trust, how to express emotions, how to handle conflict, how to receive love. Whether we realize it or not, those early experiences often become the foundation for how we navigate relationships later in life. When I think about how I learned love, I think about food, and I know that sounds very Haitian, but it's true, I promise you. In my household, love was cooked. Love was served on a plate. Love was making sure that everyone ate. Love was making sure everyone had what they needed. Love looked like sacrifice. Love looked like provision. Love looked like showing up. If someone needed help, you showed up. If someone was struggling, you showed up. If someone needed support, you showed up. Acts of service were the language of love in my family. And I want to be clear about something. I came from a good home, a home many children would dream of having. My parents loved me. They sacrificed for me. They protected me. They provided for me. I never questioned whether I was loved, not once. But as I got older, I realized something important. Love and emotional connection are not always the same thing. You can be deeply loved and still feel emotionally unseen. Let that settle in. I think many people struggle with the truth because acknowledging it can feel uncomfortable. Sometimes it feels like betrayal. We tell ourselves, my parents did the best that they could. They sacrificed. They loved me. All of those things can be true. While it's also true that something may have been missing. Looking back now, I understand the things that I couldn't understand as a child. I understand responsibility. sacrifice, pressure, survival. But the child version of me didn't understand any of that. The child version of me only knew what she felt, and what she felt was longing to be understood. Years later, I was introduced to something called attachment theory, and suddenly a lot of things started making sense. Attachment refers to the emotional bond we form with our caregivers. What makes attachment so powerful is that it doesn't stay in childhood. It follows us into friendships, relationships, adulthood. It quietly shapes what we expect from connection. Children who experience consistent emotional support often develop secure attachment. They learn my feelings matter, people can be trusted, love is safe. There are people who develop anxious attachment. They learn people might leave. I need reassurance. I have to work hard to keep this connection. And there are other people who develop avoidant attachment. They learn I'll handle things by myself. I can't depend on people. Being vulnerable doesn't feel safe. And if I'm being honest, when I first learned about attachment theory, I saw pieces of myself in all three, because healing is rarely black and white. There were moments I feared abandonment. There were moments I needed reassurance. There were moments I became hyper independent. Moments where I pushed people away. When I first learned about attachment theory, I saw pieces of myself in all three, because healing is rarely black and white. There were moments I feared abandonment. Moments I needed reassurance. Moments I became hyper independent. Moments I pushed people away. The truth is, many of us are carrying different versions of ourselves at the same time. And that's why healing requires awareness, not judgment, but awareness. My father often traveled for work when I was growing up. And surprisingly, his absence never became my wound. From a young age, I understood why he was gone. I was told he was working, providing, sacrificing, making sure that I had what I needed. And when he came home, he loved me loudly. He celebrated me, he supported me, he showed me affection. So I never interpreted his absence as abandonment. I interpreted it as sacrifice. My mother's impact was a little different. Not because she didn't love me. She absolutely loved me. Looking back now, I can see how much she carried, how much sacrifice, how much she protected me. Nobody ever physically harmed me, and I was never abused. My mom made sure of that. But emotionally, I often felt alone. And I think that's one of the hardest truths that many adults eventually face. You can love your parents deeply and still acknowledge something that was missing. The younger version of me simply wanted softness, a little more gentleness, a little more understanding, a little more emotional availability. Today, I see something differently. I no longer see my mom as being mean. I see a woman trying to protect her daughter the best way she knew how. But protection and emotional connection are not always the same thing. Let that settle in. Protection and emotional connection are not always the same thing. That realization eventually introduced me to another concept: emotional availability. Emotional availability is a person's ability to be present with emotions, for their emotions and the emotions of others. It's the ability to listen without judgment, to create emotional safety, to make someone feel seen, heard, and understood. I think many parents love their children deeply, but struggle with emotional availability. Not because they don't care, but because nobody taught them how. Many parents provide food, shelter, protection, structure, but emotional availability is something different. It's the ability to sit with feelings, to hold space, to make a child feel emotionally safe. Understanding that changed the way that I viewed my childhood. It helped me move away from blame and move towards understanding. Because sometimes people can only give what they have, and sometimes they love us with the tools that they were given. As I continued healing, I started noticing something. I wasn't always choosing people because they were healthy. I was choosing people because they felt familiar. And there is a difference. Attachment theory teaches us that we develop unconscious beliefs about ourselves and other people. Beliefs like, am I lovable? Can people be trusted? Will people stay? Do my feelings matter? Most of us never consciously think about these questions, but they influence our lives anyways. And until we become aware of those beliefs, we quietly guide our choices, our friendships, our relationships, and our attachments. One of the most fascinating concepts in psychology is something called repetition compulsion. It's the tendency to recreate familiar emotional experiences, not because we enjoy suffering, not because we want pain, but because part of us is still trying to make sense of old wounds, still trying to finish old conversations, still trying to resolve old stories. And one day, I had a realization that changed everything. The emotional, unavailable people I kept choosing gave me a familiar feeling. The distance, the longing, the uncertainty, the feeling that if I just love a little harder, if I just tried a little harder, if I just gave a little more, maybe I will finally receive what I was looking for. That realization was uncomfortable because it meant I wasn't always choosing people based on compatibility. Sometimes I was choosing people based on what was familiar. And familiar is not always the same thing as safe. Let that settle in. Sometimes familiar is simply what our nervous system recognizes, even when it hurts. Once I became aware of it, I started seeing patterns everywhere. Patterns that followed me from relationship to relationship, friendship to friendship, season to season. I saw a fear of abandonment. I saw hyper independence. I saw myself needing reassurance. I saw myself choosing emotionally unavailable people. I saw myself overgiving. I saw myself trying to save people, falling in love with potential, becoming someone's therapist instead of their partner. And the hardest part wasn't even seeing the pattern. The hardest part was realizing the pattern was trying to teach me something. It was revealing places where healing was still needed. Not because I was broken, because awareness was inviting me in to grow. And growth often begins with honesty. For a long time, I believed that heartbreaks belonged to romantic relationships. I thought heartbreak belonged to breakups. Then life introduced me to a different type of grief, the grief of losing a friend. My first true heartbreak wasn't even romantic. It was a friendship. And honestly, I think that's why it hurt so much. It wasn't built on attraction, fantasy. It was built on understanding. I genuinely did not want to stop being around this person. I understood them beyond the surface and they understood me the same. And if you've ever experienced that kind of connection, you know how rare it is. To be fully seen, to be fully understood, and to not have to explain every single piece of yourself. The circumstances forced me to walk away. But if I'm being honest, I still miss my friend wholeheartedly. Even now, there are moments when life becomes overwhelming. Moments when school feels overwhelming. Moments when building HIPSTERS Diaries feels overwhelming. Moments when community work feels overwhelming. Sometimes I still think, if anyone would understand this version of me, it would be them. Because some people just don't support your life, they understand your spirit. I truly believe friendship heartbreaks deserve more conversation than it usually gets. Psychologists tells us that friendship plays a major role in identity development. They help us feel accepted, validated, and understood. They often become places where we discover ourselves. So when those friendships end, we're not just grieving a person. We're grieving a version of ourselves that existed with them. That grief is real. Whether society acknowledges it or not, sometimes the deepest heartbreaks are not romantic. Sometimes there are people who knew us best. My healing journey eventually taught me something beautiful. God was using relationships as mirrors. Every friendship, every attachment, every disappointment, every goodbye. They weren't just revealing other people. They were revealing me. My fears, my wounds, my insecurities, my growth, and slowly I began to understand something. Love is a mirror. Let that breathe. At 16, I thought love was what I saw on television. The fairy tales, the grand gestures, the fantasy. I thought love was somebody choosing me. I thought love was finding the right person. But today, I understand love differently. Today, I believe that love is a mirror, a reflection of where we are emotionally. Where I choose to place my love often reflects something within me. What I tolerate reflects me. What I chase reflects me. What I avoid reflects me. What I heal reflects me. When I repeatedly chose emotionally unavailable people, that reflected something. When I overgave, that reflected something. When I abandoned myself to save other people, that reflected something. Not because I was broken, but because relationships have a way of revealing what still needs attention. And I think that's one of the greatest gifts that love gives us. It reveals us. It shows us our fears, our wounds, our patterns, and our insecurities, but also reveals our strength, our growth, our healing, and our capacity to evolve. So today, when I think about love, I don't just think about another person. I think about self-awareness. I think about growth. I think about peace. I think about becoming. Because every place I have placed my love has taught me something about myself. At 16, I thought love was someone choosing me. Today, healthy love looks very different. Healthy love is peace. Healthy love is consistency. Healthy love is emotional safety. Healthy love is friendship. Healthy love is honesty. Healthy love is freedom. Freedom to be yourself. Freedom to evolve. Freedom to grow. Healthy love doesn't require shrinking. It doesn't require performing. It doesn't require abandonment to yourself to keep someone else comfortable. Healthy love allows both people to become, and I think that's what makes love beautiful. One of the greatest lessons love ever taught me was that I could not fully show up and love someone to my full capacity until I learned how to love myself. Not pieces of myself, not the version of myself I presented to the world, my whole self. Because when you don't fully know yourself and you go looking for love, you become lost because you don't know who you are. You don't truly know what you're looking for. And maybe that's why self-discovery and love are so deeply connected. Because the healthier our relationships with ourselves become, the healthier our relationship with others become. To the younger me, the girl who spent years searching for herself inside of other people, I know what you were looking for. You were looking for understanding, acceptance, gentleness, validation, emotional safety, and freedom to be yourself. And because you couldn't always find those things, you spent years searching for them. But there was never anything wrong with you. You weren't too emotional. You weren't too sensitive. You weren't too much. You were simply asking for what every child deserves: to feel seen, to feel heard, to feel understood. And that one day has come, because I see you. You built it all within yourself. Jara Safari family, before we part ways tonight, take a deep breath. Think about the people who left emotional fingerprints on your life. The people who taught you love. The people who taught you heartbreak. The people who taught you healing. Offer them gratitude, not because everything was perfect, but because every experience reveals something. Every friendship, every relationship, every attachment, every goodbye, they were all teachers. And every season brought you closer to yourself. Last week, we explored identity. Tonight, we explored attachment. And next week, we continue the journey of becoming. Thank you for reasoning with me. Thank you for growing with me. Thank you for choosing awareness over autopilot. This is HIPSTERS Diaries, where truth finds a soft place to land. Ja guide, Ja bless. Jah Rastafari.
Thank you for reasoning with me. Remember, to transform a heart is to save a life. Until next time, continue the journey inward. Love, peace, unity, and blessings. Jah Rastafari.